Empower Digi Teach Project. Unit 2, Assessment with Digital Technologies. Lesson 2.2, Analysing Evidence, Feedback and Planning.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we are here for our regular teacher practice sharing meeting. Our theme for today's meeting is to gain information about how digital tools can help us to make sense of students' responses to classroom assessment tasks, give feedback to students and make adjustments to our instruction to better support student understanding. What is your current practices in classroom assessment in terms of making meaning of students' responses, giving them feedback and adjusting instruction?
I am not sure what you are referring to when you are talking about making sense of student data, but I regularly implement formative assessment tasks during my instruction, where I tailor each of the questions in my formative assessment to specific learning outcomes of the unit that I am teaching. That way, I can see the percentage of my students who are doing well or not across my unit-level learning outcomes. Then I discuss the questions that the majority of students responded incorrectly. If needed, I might plan reteaching the specific parts of the unit as well.
That's great, Emily. Tailoring the questions with your learning outcomes is a great practice. However, you should take into consideration how well the questions cover the depth and scope of your learning outcomes. The scope of learning outcome is about what content understanding students need to achieve to be considered as successful given the learning objectives. The depth of learning outcome is about deciding the type of cognitive processes students to demonstrate to be considered as competent given the learning objectives. When you are mapping your learning objectives with the questions in your classroom assessment, you can create a table like this one. On the rows of the tables, you can put your learning objectives. In the columns, you can specify the scope and depth of each of the learning objectives specified in each of the row. In the artifact column, you can specify the type of students' work that best align with the scope and depth of your learning outcome. For instance, in this learning objective, the scope are to understand the causes and effects of climate change. Understanding the concept of carbon footprint and how it is calculated. In addition, social and economic factors and their relations to carbon footprint. Depth of the learning outcomes include students analyzing, comparing and contrasting, evaluating and justifying ideas. The artifact that the scope and depth of the learning outcome can be assessed include open-ended questions and online discussions boards and collaboration tools. This table is a classification of the digital tools in terms of their affordances regarding the classroom assessment as well as the type of artifacts they can produce.
Thank you, David. This has been a very useful guidance in terms of what we are doing for classroom assessment and how well they are aligned with the learning objectives. Digital tools also are great opportunities for students to produce various artifacts that can be evidence of student learning. My question is how to proceed when it is ready to implement the digital classroom assessment.
That is a very good question. The next step is to administer the digital classroom assessment task and collect students' evidence of learning. Once you have gathered the evidence, then it is the time to interpret it and give feedback to students about their learning.
That's one of the most challenging part of classroom assessment. Interpreting students' responses to make meaning about their learning.
Oh yeah, but also one of the important part of classroom assessment.
I am trying to get a deep sense of my students' thinking during instruction, to give them immediate feedback about their learning. However, the only assessment type that I use for quick analysis and fast feedback is the multiple choice questions. However, most of the time, the multiple choice questions is not give us deep understanding of student learning. If there is any suggestion about how to overcome this challenge, I would be glad.
I use AI-based tools for overcoming this challenge.
Oh, that's great, Emma. Can you tell us more about that?
Digital tools allow us to collect students' responses in a digital format. This makes it to transfer to other digital tools very easily. What I am usually doing is that I ask open-ended questions to get a deep understanding of a topic that I am teaching using digital tools such as Kahoot or Formative, or even discussion board tool within Google Classroom. Then, I download and import those responses to Notebooklim, which is AI-based tool developed by Google that allow asking various questions and get a response based on the data you upload to it. When you go to notebooklim.google.com, you can sign up with your Gmail credentials. After that, you will generate a notebook in which you will upload your data files and where you will ask questions to AI to get a deep sense of your data. Then you can upload your student responses to the notebook through various options. Once you upload all of your data to the notebook, then it is time to ask questions to gain a deep understanding of your students' learning. You are free to ask as many and varied questions as you want. One of the questions that I am usually asked is, what are the common themes across the students' response? This allows me to see the common understanding among my students. I would highly suggest asking series of questions to better understand the responses of your students. Once you think it is enough to ask questions to data or you think that data do not give you a new information, then it is time to finish the meaning-making process and think about feedback. Here you see the analysis of the question of the common themes across student responses. Once you have made sense of your students' responses, then it is important to give feedback to your students. Your feedback should have the following aspects. Descriptive. Rather than simply assigning grades or scores, feedback should provide descriptive information about students' performance, explaining why certain aspects were successful or areas that require attention. Goal-oriented. Feedback should be aligned with learning goals and objectives, helping students understand how their performance relates to these goals and what steps they can take to achieve them. Encouraging. Feedback should foster a growth mindset by emphasizing the belief that intelligence and abilities can be developed through effort and practice. Individualization. Feedback should be tailored to the needs and abilities of each student, taking into account their prior knowledge, learning style, and unique strengths and challenges. Specificity. Effective feedback is specific and focused, addressing particular aspects of students' work or understanding. In this example feedback, instead of giving vague or generalized comments such as, "Great essay," or, "You need more detail," this feedback pinpoints exact parts of the work and uses clear examples to illustrate strengths and areas for improvement. Offers precise, actionable steps for future improvement. This level of detail helps the student understand exactly what they did well, what needs improvement, and how to approach similar tasks in the future. Timeliness. Feedback should be provided promptly after students complete an assessment or task, enabling them to reflect on their performance while the learning experience is still fresh in their minds. For instance, timeliness of a feedback can be realized through providing feedback to students at various time points of the learning process. Initial feedback during class right after the assessment process is completed can be effective for immediate in-class clarification, ensuring students don't repeat mistakes on upcoming assignments. Individualized comments after immediate class feedback help students see exactly where they need to improve while the quiz is still fresh. Opportunity for dialogue after individual evaluation reinforces understanding and allows for real-time improvement.
Emma, that's a very useful and rich information. Thank you so much. One thing left for today's meeting, which is adjusting instruction. Can anybody provide us suggestions for how to adjust instruction?
If I see majority of my students struggling with understanding a concept as a result of my assessment, I then reteach the concept with employing slightly different instructional methods. That's what I usually do.
That was what I was usually doing, but realized that reteaching was not an effective method for overcoming challenges students face when understanding a complex concept.
So what do you do then?
When I was reteaching, I realized that I was assuming that students didn't understand because of insufficient exposure to instruction, but the issue may lie in misconceptions, lack of engagement, or an inappropriate teaching method that I was using. Thus, it was demotivating for my students because I was exposing them to same materials again. Rather than reteaching, now, I make heterogeneous groups of students in terms of their understanding of the concept that I am trying to teach. Then, I assign problems to each group. That way, within a group, student who has more advanced understanding of the concept compared to their peers has to explain to their peers.
That's a great suggestion. Thanks everyone for participating today's meeting. I think today was very helpful to all of us in terms of effective use of digital tools in pedagogically effective ways in assessing our students' learning.